Irashaimase! Hello and welcome to Fataris' Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fataris. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and on the menu this week we have Orbital Bullet, a 360 roguelite run and gun. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. From developer Smokestab, Orbital Bullet released to Steam in March of 2022. Now, in November of 22, it's available for the Nintendo Switch, and that's the version we're looking at today. So this game is basically the combination of, if you take your roguelite structures, basically a procedurally generated run where you're going to have different weapons, skills, that sort of thing throughout the course of your run. Then you add in a bit of Contra and a side of like Defender, or more specifically Resogun, you get Orbital Bullet. And if that's something that sounds interesting to you, I encourage you to check out this game. But with that said, let's dive into it and you can kind of make up your mind from the gameplay that you see here. After loading the game, you'll find yourself at this hub area here, and there's a lot to go over, so we'll go through things just really quickly. First things first, you've got your classes. There are 4 different classes, each one specializes in a different weapon. It's important to note you also have individual skill trees for all the various classes, and the various experience to level up these classes are a little bit harder to come by than some of the other experience in the game, so it's going to be a while before you can max out your classes. Today we're going to be showing off the Mercenary, and we'll also take this opportunity to upgrade the next skill in the Mercenary's tree, the Critical Strike, giving us additional Critical Strike, if I can press the right button. Okay, the next up, there's this mission overview. That's where you can look over your missions, your objectives, to unlock potentially more of the upgrades for your classes. The weapons locker is one of the important parts of this kind of roguelite. The more weapons you have, the more diverse your run can be and the funner you can have with it. And this game has 42 weapons. At this point, like a good 20 some odd runs into the game, I've only unlocked 18 of them. So there's quite a bit of replayability even with just this alone. Then we have some random weapons that are given to us at the start of the run that we can choose to pick between. You always start off with a pistol. But for our purposes today, let's go ahead and grab these 2 that are here, both the shotgun and the energy bola. Then each character also, once you unlocked it, has a special skill ability. And in the case of the Mercenary, it's this bullet frisbee. And we'll go ahead and pick that up to use. So the game, you'll see which bosses we've defeated here. I've gotten half of them so far, so making progress, but the game does start off difficult. It basically wants you to go and play through and have deaths and ultimately use what you pick up in the run to power yourself up. So here we find ourselves in the gameplay of Orbital Bullet. So I was comparing it to games like Resogun. As you can see, there's sort of this, or Defender, because we've got this 360 playfield that we're working in here, and we can go left or right. It's like that Defender idea, but more fleshed out here, so hence the Resogun comparison. There's various enemies we need to defeat before we can move on to the second run, and depending on what weapons we're using, what kind of areas we're in, will definitely tailor how we're fighting through things. In the course of the runs, we'll encounter things like these cubes here, which give us perks. So in this case, that's really good, hardened ammunition, so additional damage. And there'll sometimes be things like this here. If we had a key card, we could unlock this particular, actually we do have some in reserve. We can unlock this for a special rift, which will take us to a harder section, and we can see that here in just a second, there's other ways to access special dimensional rifts as well. That perk gave us a chance to get additional money. And there's what are called nanobytes, those triangular experience points I just picked up, that will ultimately allow us to increase our skills. So here we can spend health points to enter a dimensional rift, and we will do so. So depending on how you access a dimensional rift, if it was won through a key card, it's most likely going to be defeating the dimensional rift in as quickly a time as possible. This particular dimensional rift is a little bit different. It's going about defeating the enemies. We're taking as minimal damage as possible. So each time you take damage, you go down a star, and if like you defeat it, it's still at least 1 star, which looks like that's going to be what we get in this particular run. So I've been using specifically just the energy bola so far. It's a really neat weapon where you've got this orb you send out, and it will go out and return like a boomerang. But we could change the weapons to something like, say, the shotgun, and we'll use this one going forward. So we only got 1 star. In that case, the game gave us a pair of keycards. Definitely useful. So after you've completed a level, you can, there's some levels that have you climb to the next one, but in a lot of cases you'll just press the L button to go to the next level, which in this case happens to be a shop. Once you've gotten certain upgrades, you can have this canister to heal you on the shops. Extremely useful. And there's also an upgrade station. So these upgrades will always be random for your run, and it's possible to add additional lines to this skill tree. As you can see at the bottom, we have available skill points. You start with 1 skill point, and you level up 1 skill point for every level you get. You get experience for defeating enemies, and there are also some items that will give you experience as well. For our purposes today, the laser boots are awesome, but let's take the trigger finger. So this basically gives you a reduced cooldown between shots, basically upping your rate of fire. And weapon-wise, ooh, we got some good stuff here. Let's swap out the energy bola to this rifle level 3 so we can see a little bit more gameplay. So in some cases you're not going to be moving vertically through stages. Sometimes you'll be jumping to a different cylinder. And those transitions, I have to admit, are very stylishly handled, so I can appreciate the presentation that the game has. So the reason for taking a weapon like the rifle, you can see we've are shooting almost halfway around the entire stage, and some weapons will circle the entire stage, making your strategy of what you're picking weapon-wise very important. Jumping to the next sector, we're nearly done with this particular floor. I'll kind of explain that just as soon as we take out these enemies. So you've got these enemies here which have shields in front of them. Once they turn towards you, you can't shoot them. Your options are to jump over them, or in the case of what I did there, we used our dodge ability to dodge through them. You are invulnerable during like the midpoint of your dodge, so keep that in mind. We got burst rifle level 2 here. I am going to replace the rifle I picked up with that. This is the burst rifle, really lets you hammer out the damage quickly. So at the end of the first stage, wrong button. At the end of the first stage, throughout the course of a level, you'll have these teleporters, and this is a stage here. So we had these like 4 stages we moved through, then we moved over to this cylinder, and we find ourselves there. You'll have this skill pattern selection, and here we can add an additional 1 of 2 different skills. So you can look through critical bullet, critical ranged attack, hovering, melee, or we could have bomb dodge, spiked boots, combat drone, or credit master. I really like the idea of going with the critical bullets, so we'll take this particular skill module, and then we can also upgrade the skills to this point. Where I want to get to the critical bullets, the fastest way to do it would be to upgrade the laser boots, and next time I have a skill point I can increase the critical hit chance that I have with bullets. The laser boots give me this awesome ability to have a laser fire from my boot on a second jump of my double jump. And then we just go to the next level. We'll start at the beginning of another set of cylinders. So the upper caves in this case. And you can see right off the bat why I would have chosen to take this burst rifle. It just really hammers out the damage quickly. And that's one of the things that I find like the most useful in this game. So weapons like the burst rifle, miniguns, like submachine guns, things like that are kind of been my go-to. So this timer here is actually interesting. If you look in the bottom left, you'll see the time we've taken so far for this run. If we've gotten to this point at the 2-minute or before the 2-minute mark, we would have had this special chest which would have given us tons of the nanobyte, so the triangular experience points that you can use to upgrade your runs between like completing this run and the next. So we don't have any available skill points yet, which is unfortunate. We can't upgrade our crit damage, but we could, if we wanted to, buy another one of the hardened ammunition perks, and this will give us additional damage. So now we're dealing plus 10 percent damage. Definitely worth it. So finding ourselves at another stage here. Looks like most of the enemies were in this middle circle. We'll quickly take them out, and we can jump to the next sector. But before we do that, let's collect some of these ammunition from the outer circle. Jump to the next. And ultimately, after going through all these different stages of the cylinders, you'll get to finally a boss stage. And in the case of the first stage, it's only like waves of enemies. But this particular lock chest had money for us. But for most of the game, you'll encounter rather like specific bosses. And to my knowledge, at least from the beginning, there's 8 of them. Or not 8, 6 of them. And I wonder if we have an additional unlocked boss after that. I have only been able to get through what I'm assuming is about half the game. Here we have the option to enter the boss floor, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Because as your base level, the game is actually quite difficult. So it's definitely one that's encouraging you to play the game quite a bit, access new power-ups, and, oops, wrong button. Access like additional power-ups and ultimately power yourself up significantly. So we took care of the 3 enemy waves, and that's our first cylinder complete. There's like life we can use to heal. We can pick up an additional weapon if we want. I am going to replace the shotgun we've got with that flat cannon. Then we can select our next level. So depending on which stage you've completed, you'll either be going to a selection of between 2 different stages or 1. So basically you've got 1 stage, then you have a choice of 2, then another 1 stage, then a choice of 2, and that's as far as I've gotten. So at this point, Ditus here is interesting. You're climbing up a tree, whereas Muto, you're going down into an underground research facility. It's pretty neat, the differences in both enemies and graphics you have here. So for our purposes, we'll continue moving up. And that basically is Orbital Bullet served up for your enjoyment. It's definitely one of those games where I feel there's a significant one more run element to it. So you'll complete a run by like losing all your like health and be unsatisfied with that and be like, well, I can do better. I can go one more run. And you'll start up like just another one, because sometimes like your runs will go and be as long as like half an hour. Other like runs you'll like not get decent perks and die off pretty quickly. The better you are, the more like leveled up you are, the longer your runs will last, so keep that in mind. But as far as the minus flavors are concerned, so sometimes it doesn't feel like we're getting decent scaling from like your RNG. So you'll like won't be getting like better weapons or abilities at a fast enough rate, and the enemies will ultimately like take you out pretty quickly. Or in the case of some areas, you'll get to a new area that you've never been to before, and it will take you out quite quickly. Another like thing that I've like noticed as a minus flavor is on the Switch, sometimes the frame rate and just the performance gets pretty framey. Like in this situation here where we have a lot of enemies and a lot going on, like the Switch does slow down. So I intentionally died there so I could kind of show you what happens between your runs. So after your runs, we can go and spend those like nanobyte experience points we picked up on this skill tree here. So there's different categories, basically your like weapon enhancement area. This is your like skill abilities. And comboing, the bottom right has largely to go and do with the economy, and the bottom left is health. So I've been working on putting points towards increased health, so I have just enough to get the next level of that, and we can start on this shield level. Once you've spent all those points, we find ourselves back here. If you look in the bottom right, we have a new seed, and we can continue from this point. Actually, I haven't taken the sniper rifle before, so I'm pretty excited by that. And the rocket launcher, it's pretty awesome. I keep on forgetting to use my skill ability as well. As far as the plus flavors are concerned, so I love the presentation of the game. The way that the pixel art looks, the whole rotation of the stage itself. So much of it is like what I am looking for in this kind of a roguelite experience. So I definitely feel fortunate to have like tried this one out. It's one that I've been quite enjoying my time with. And if this is something that looks interesting to you, I encourage you to check it out as well. Alright, that'll just about wrap it up for this week's episode of Shoot 'em Up Saturday. As always, I want to thank you so much for joining us this week. I hope you yourself have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next time.